Hey there, goblins. Welcome to Goblin Salvage Rights. My name is Robert.
And I'm Erik.
And today's episode is about duels.
Duels it done. Duels at the lake.
As you can see, we're on a vacation.
Yep.
Us and the fam decided to go and hang out at the beautiful Detroit Lake in Oregon. And we figured when in Rome, shoot like the Romans.
Yeah, don't be Spanish.
Don't be Spanish. So we figured we'd roll our podcast. We were planning on shooting next week here at the lake. Hopefully it goes well. If not, so be it. Maybe the wind's terrible. Maybe we'll give up. Who knows?
Yep. It'll be an adventure. And we also have a special guest host today.
Yes.
This right here is little Maisel. She has been helping us spearhead this entire vacation effort. And she's the one who reminded us that we still have to do this podcast. So here we are.
I was expecting her to be way more barky than she was.
I know, right? She was quiet, which is great.
Honestly, like she was yappier in your house.
Yeah. She's not trained in intimidation, so that's not a thing.
Definitely. She never gets a -2 circumstance modifier to intimidation checks.
Yeah, but she does get a reaction, to people coming into her own home. So that's how I built her.
She gets +2 perception bonus for finding intruders.
Yeah, my wife, the GM, totally signed off on all this.
Absolutely. So we're gonna skip. We're kind of on a bit of a time clock because I'm worried about batteries.
Battery's going to run out.
So we're just going to skip what we played. We played a lot of games, and we'll catch you up on all of those next time we do the podcast. So let's jump straight into the topic today. Duels. So what is a duel, Erik? Tell me about it.
A duel is a prescribed set of rules that two players agree upon in order to achieve an outcome. So if you think of like duels at dawn or, dueling daggers, sword fights, that sort of thing, you agree not to do certain things during the duel, and you agree you can only have access to other things during the duel.
Yeah, I really like how duels are officiated. You know, there has to be a third party making sure both parties are following the rules. If not,
a neutral third party, hopefully.
Yeah, it just degrades. If not, it degrades into
shenanigans. The word is shenanigans.
Or regular combat is kind of what I was going for. Yeah. It's got what I like about the system is that it has a rock paper scissors mechanic built
a little
into
bit,
it.
which I was super suspicious of at first, and then I sort of started.
Looks really cool.
It's different, certainly, from all the other PF2 subsystems out there.
Absolutely. I don't think we've seen a system yet with a rock, paper, scissors mechanic at all.
Sure. And just to be clear, when we say rock, paper, scissors, we don't mean, paper beats rock beats whatever. It's more like when you have the action you're doing that trumps the other action, you get a bonus thing you can do in the form of a reaction. It's not game breaking. It doesn't win that particular round of combat. It just lets you get that little extra
gives you an edge.
Yeah.
And
that's what duels are all about. Those small inches forward until you finally reach that finish line.
What I really like about it is, so the way the turn order works in duels is each player rolls initiative at the top of each round. It reminds me a lot of skirmish.
And we're talking about combat duels, not magic duels at this point, right?
Yeah. Okay. Magic duels come later. They're very similar to combat duels with a couple extra pieces.
Just enough of a difference to be its own thing.
Exactly. Sure. So combat duels, specifically, you roll initiative at the top of the round, and then that determines a turn order because there's only two of you. This reminds me a lot of skirmish war games, actually.
Okay.
Because a lot of modern skirmish war games have you do that. You redo initiative at the top of rounds all the time.
Sure.
I really like that. It keeps things fresh. It allows you to get double turns.
Absolutely.
Which is really important.
It is. And the thing I like about this particular thing is, when you're rolling initiative in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, you typically use your perception or whatever the appropriate skill is. But in duels, you're limited to the skills you can use to determine that initiative. And if I remember right, there's 3 of them, right? You can.
That's where the rock, paper, scissors begins.
Exactly right. Yeah. So go ahead and continue on that one.
So the three skills are perception, deception, and intimidation.
So everybody has perception on their character sheet.
Absolutely.
And the other 2 you need to be trained for.
Yeah. So this kind of suggests that duels are good for people who have charisma bonuses. This is kind of like a charisma bonus focused system. You know, this is probably tailor made for swashbucklers. I want to say,
bards,
swashbucklers. I mean,
oracles.
swashbuckler comes to mind just because it's combat oriented, right?
Sure.
So in combat, there are very few full marshals that are also high charisma. You know, I think like maybe champions, swashbucklers. Those are the two major ones that come to mind. But I mean, with the new changes to Pathfinder that are coming.
Yeah, Dark Archives kind of open that up a little bit.
Oh, yeah, you're right. We got the, not the occultist, the Thaumaturge.
Thank you.
Thaumaturge
I was blanking.
is super charisma based. How could I forget about the Thaumaturge? And they're full martial.
Yeah.
So yeah, this really opens. This is really a charisma man's game.
Kind of, yeah, which makes sense because when you think of duels and you read books on duels, you watch shows, it's always kind of like rich people, Romeo and Juliet type stuff. We all know rich
people have charisma.
Well, they certainly have training. Everybody's good. You got to take those music lessons when you're rich.
That's true. So,
but yeah, the rock paper scissors thing. So. What I'm hearing you say by that is that each one of those 3 skills that you use to determine your initiative is either rock or paper or scissors. So why don't we just go through the 3 and then people can kind of track from there.
Right. So these are reactions.
And you gain these reactions as you determine what you're rolling for initiative.
Exactly. So you roll initiative using one of these 3 skills, and then that gives you access to a reaction. Those reactions are bullying press, which is intimidation, deceptive sidestep, which is deception, and sense weakness. So real quick, they're all reactions. Basically, they have individual triggers that are all different and interesting, in my opinion. And then they have effects. They have a standard effect. And then if your opponent used initiative, if they use the opposite initiative or whatever, you get a little bonus. So let's say you use bullying press. Bullying press says, the trigger is you attempt a melee strike against your opponent, but you haven't rolled yet. And it says if you hit, your opponent becomes frightened 1. If your opponent is using perception for their initiative, when this ability is used, they become frightened 2. So it's enough of a rock, paper, scissors to have a serious edge. We all know, and you should know at home, that a +1 is a big deal in Pathfinder.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a lot of +1s going on in here. There's reactions. There's whatever you're going to do for your round.
With the frightened condition is so all-encompassing that a +1 to frightened really is almost like a +1 to yourself.
Sure.
Because they get -1 AC and they get -1 to hit.
So I heard you say a lot of words right now, and they make sense to me because I read this thing. But they have not. So can we go through a really quick, lightning quick example of a round of combat?
Let me go over the other 2 reactions you have, and then we'll go from the top and kind of talk through a duel.
A sample round?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we got deceptive sidestep. An opponent hits but does not critically hit you with a melee strike. So deception is a defensive reaction. And basically
Which makes sense.
You draw your enemy in and pull away at the last moment. The triggering opponent must roll again and take the second result.
Yeah.
Which is super strong.
Yeah, it's disadvantage straight up in this edition.
You've already seen their attack roll. You already know if they've hit. If your opponent is using intimidation for initiative, when this ability is used, they also take a -2 circumstance penalty to the second attack roll. That -2 is devastating, especially as a circumstance bonus, because those are a little rarer, I'd like to say. Especially, I think, in these duel situations when you have 2 marshals.
Yep.
Finally, you have sense weakness. That is the perception-based one. If you attempt a melee strike against your opponent, but you haven't rolled yet. So again, an aggressive one, an attacking reaction. You pick a precise moment to attack, giving you an edge. Your opponent is flat-footed against the attack.
Love flat-footed.
If your opponent is using deception for initiative when this ability is used, they are instead flat-footed until the start of your next turn. So this, if you think about it, perception is really the skill that a rogue would want to use. Because getting flat-footed, the way rogues are built, they either have a social skill that gives them flat-footed by getting a skill, or they rely on their friends to get flat-footed. So if you're playing a rogue who's in a duel and they don't have one of those subclasses that allows them to artificially cause their sneak attack damage, you want to use perception to get the flat-footed.
Right, and your opponent knows that you're built that way.
Exactly.
And rock, paper, scissors, I lose every game of rock, paper, scissors I ever do because everybody knows where I lean.
Yeah.
And they use that against me. And that's something that this sort of like combat structure offers as an experience that you can't get in regular turn-based combat in Pathfinder 2nd Edition.
Absolutely.
It's gamier and guessier and kind of like, I don't know, it makes me feel a little shakier.
Yeah, and
it's
it
more
creates
exciting
tension.
for me.
It creates tension, and that's what duels need is tension.
And the reacts in here, it seemed like they're a lot more, there's a lot more teeth to these reacts than like what I would associate with a champion's reaction or a monk's reaction or a fighter's reaction.
Gotcha.
Those are kind of predictable, samey.
Yeah.
You just know they're coming every round of combat. But these are kind of like every single decision point matters.
And I think both people need to state obviously both people need to state what they're using for their initiative at the same time.
Yeah.
Sure. Obviously. So let's talk about how one of these looks like in a round. So both players write down they write down what they're going to use as their initiative and they reveal them at the same time. The DM is probably playing one of the players. And then initiative is determined by rolling a skill check. You now have initiative, and the combat begins. The player who has the highest initiative goes, and now they have an opportunity to reach into their pocket. They can do whatever they want before.
Whatever is agreed upon by the dictates of the duel.
Exactly.
Right.
And so normally they have access to almost everything they can do.
On their character sheet.
But in addition, they have these reactions that I just described, and those give them a little bit of edge.
Right.
And now the person who goes first knows that the other person has either a rock or a scissor against them, right? The other thing that's interesting is they need to plan for a double turn. Now, I've played a decent amount of Age of Sigmar. That's a game in Warhammer. It's a fantasy version of Warhammer. And in Age of Sigmar, the game really revolves around the double turn because in that war game, you roll for initiative, in this case, at the top of every round, just like then. But I think the stakes are a little bigger because it's a lot more swingier. And what I've learned from AOS really carries over into a combat that I would be running in this system. You have to ask yourself, if they get the double turn, how screwed am I?
Right.
Can they just finish me with a double turn?
Ahead.
Exactly. How much more likely are they to grab the double turn than I am? Do I want to hold on to because if you have first turn, you can always hold your action and delay, let them attack you, but now you are more likely to get the double turn and go, double on them.
It's that extra layer of strategy that you get.
Exactly. And that's
it's a different kind of tactical based combat than what we're used to in this system.
That's what I like about dueling.
Yeah. It's a mini game.
It's a mini game, and it's a really well designed mini game that reminds me of some of the best war games that are being made right now. In my opinion, Age of Sigmar is easily one of the best war games on the market. Period.
Someday I will play it.
Yeah.
I've sunk so much money into Warhammer and gained Citadel over the years.
Yeah. So, do we want to jump into? Do we want to walk into magic dueling, or
I'd like to do a real quick sample combat on the actual combat dueling, just so people know, like turn for turn what it looks like.
So
the very first thing you do is you secretly decide which skill you're going to choose,
and then you reveal
to roll initiative, and that's perception, deception,
intimidation,
and intimidation. One of those three. Each one of those three has a reaction that's tied to it.
Yep.
Once we have done that secretly, what's the second step?
Then the players take their turns.
We take their turns, right? We reveal our initiatives and we have our numbers. I go before you in this case.
Okay. And then you get to choose, do I delay my action and let me take it so you possibly can grab a double turn, or do you go for the initiative? And maybe you can make a debilitating strike.
Right. And when you say double turn, if I remember right, every single turn of combat, initiative is re-rolled. It's not a single initiative that carries through all of the subsequent
That's what I mean by the double
combat.
turn. Exactly. Yeah.
So it's still a chance.
Exactly. So if you go second, that means you have the option of going twice in a row. That's what a double turn is.
Yeah, you can. You might fail that second initiative roll.
Exactly.
So it's definitely a roll of the dice, literally. So once we've done that, let's say I do wait. I delay my action, and you go first. And this is a physical combat duel.
Right.
So you move to strike.
I move to strike, and if you've used either bullying press,
what are you using?
Let's say
What skill did you pick?
I picked deception.
Okay, what's the opposing skill for deception? Intimidation.
Perception.
Perception. Let's say I use perception for this round of combat, and you used the other one.
Deception. Now, deceptive sidestep is a defensive reaction. So I was kind of hoping to grab the double turn, but you gave me initiative. So I go in for my strike. And because I'm using deception, I'm probably have a pretty good
your
deception.
react is slightly less useful because I gamed that particular moment because I won initiative. Winning initiative is really important in duels. It gives you that extra choice the other player just doesn't have.
Yeah, and I could still use my reaction on your turn, obviously, to make you re-roll your attack. But I see it more as a defensive ability and thus better on the second turn.
Sure.
Because you've already used your action, obviously. So I go in, let's say I'm playing a rogue. I go in, let's say I'm a fast rogue. I'm going to guess the rules of the game have been set where there's a boundary of sorts so we can't leave, you know? One thing that I thought about when I was doing research for this was, you know, characters like Tyler's monk in your Edgewatch game are so fast that they would never be caught if there were no bounds to a duel, like physical bounds.
Yep, it's a good way to tie a player in place.
Exactly. And, you know, duels are kind of one of those moments where you can really use things like movement or overwhelming stats to your advantage like that.
Sure.
And I think that's, I don't know, pretty fun for players. You know, as a DM running this, I would love to set up a duel in a way where maybe the bad guy is the accuser of the duel or the person who initiated the duel, and they know that you're fast, so they pay off the adjudicator to like make sure that the rules are so that it, you know, hampers your greatest ability. Maybe I make the ring pretty small, so your movement doesn't really matter. Because the ring is 30 feet in either direction, you could normally get to each other.
It's almost like you could use a certain other subsystem to monkey with this duel.
Yes. And that's a great example of how these things can build together, like build on top of each other.
Yeah, you can braid subsystems to create even higher experiences.
Absolutely. And, you know, you don't want to braid too many together because...
Start with one, move to two, move to three, and eventually we just get better. Same way with character builds.
And if your players don't like a subsystem, you can always naturally drop it off at the end of a book. That's always a great place to change things up, is at the end of a book in an adventure path or something like that.
Sure.
Or a chapter in a story.
Yeah, so specifically what I'm referring to is if you're using the reputation subsystem and you manage to get the reputation on the judge.
Yeah.
And so they favor you, and you're like, yeah, my opponent is a monk. They move way too fast. Can we make one of the rules no movement? And then, you know, so on and so forth. Yeah. But that's sort of a side case.
Yeah.
Bunny trails away. Yeah. We're back to duels.
So I move up, I do my attack, and I move away from you.
Okay.
And now you get to take your turn.
Yeah, I get to take my turn. And based on your attack and the what did I pick?
You picked perception.
Perception, and perception is sensing weakness. Yeah. So the trigger for my reaction is when I attempt a melee strike against my opponent, but I haven't rolled yet.
Yeah.
I get to do this this particular trigger.
Yeah.
And I wanted to go second so I can do this.
Right.
I picked the moment to attack, giving me the edge. My opponent is flat-footed against my attack.
Yep.
So I won initiative. I forced you to go first, and do I know what your reaction is at this point because I know what you rolled?
You do know what my action could be.
So I've got all the information and data points I need to just maximize my my successful roll. And I do. I take a strike, and you're flat-footed on this one.
Well, yeah, exactly. I think one of the interesting things about the system is that this system is really beneficial for classes that don't naturally have really good reactions. And not as powerful for classes that don't have reactions. I was just thinking the champion, you are not ally. You are not your own ally, folks.
Yeah.
The champions cannot use Retributive Strike on themselves. Yeah. That's an anti-paladin thing. So, you know, the paladins are pretty hampered. One of their main abilities in a duel is not useful.
Right.
They have no allies.
Yeah.
So this gives them an access to a reaction. But, you know, if you have like a monk or a barbarian or a fighter with attack of opportunity, like you have to choose because you only get one reaction a turn. So what are you choosing? Are you choosing the benefit you have now? Yeah. Or when I stepped away from you, maybe you took your attack of opportunity. At that moment, you have to choose, is flat-footing me on your attack better than giving me attack of opportunity? Well... you have the rock to my scissors. So even as a fighter with attack of opportunity, it may very well be better for you to not use AOO, move in, make me flat-footed because that lasts until my next turn.
Yeah.
End of my next turn. So now you can take that AOO when you get back your reaction again and play some fun games.
This subsystem feels like it could be tremendously cumbersome to a great many different kinds of players, and super fun and useful, and then like a munchkinny, if you will, to certain players. So
Absolutely.
it just feels like the dual subsystem, of which there's 2 pages on this thing, page 166, 167 in the Game Mastery Guide.
With some
It's the sort of
beautiful
thing you're
art,
like, hey guys, next week we're doing a duel, dueling pistols at dawn. Read these 2 fucking pages, and then if you have any questions, get back to me before next session.
Or better yet, an Erik special is where you pull one of the players aside ahead of the game and say, hey,
I have never done that.
There's going to be a duel, and you're going to be the one who gets dueled. So go read these systems.
I love that idea.
And
the other players at a tremendous disadvantage?
No. The other player, there is no other player. You're playing the duelist.
Oh, okay. Don't tell the other.
Don't tell the other players.
I see where you're going with this.
And confrontation happens. The NPC, the bad guy or whoever,
and then we're in on it, but the other players at the table are not.
Exactly.
Oh, that could be a fun magic moment.
All of a sudden, you and the player know all the rules for the duels, and all the other players are like, "Wait, what's going on?
Right?
You used a reaction to do what? That's awesome.
Yeah. That'd be a cool wow moment, and I'm all about the wow moment. So yeah, you're right on that.
So let's jump into magic. I think we covered a pretty good.
Sure. So these are combat, physical duels, swords, knives, that sort of thing. But with spells.
Spells are weird. Okay, so I have to say that this system works best with fighting, like regular fighting. The dueling mechanics, because when you think about it, the higher the level you get, the more abstract duels become for spellcasters. Like you could just have a thing where you're like, I cast a spell at you. I cast a cantrip at you. I cast a cantrip at you, and you only use cantrips.
And politely taking turns and cantrips,
Yeah, and that makes it fall further into the purview of the system. But, you get into 3rd, 4th, 5th level spells, and, I'm casting Stinking Cloud on your ass.
Right.
You know what I mean? And all of a sudden, if the bounds of the map aren't big enough, we're both nauseated.
Yeah,
or
the
maybe
GM needs to know
nauseated.
what the spell lists are for both players.
Yeah, or
characters.
The characters. Yeah, the NPC and the player or whatever. I don't know. So there are 2 actions. There's dueling counter and change tradition focus. So if I understand this correctly, the way this works is instead of using those 3 rolls for your initiative, you're now using.
Keep going.
The little doggy's growling.
I'm working on it. We got invaders.
Yeah. Instead, you use one of your arcane abilities. Correct?
Are we talking about traditions at this point?
Yeah, the traditions.
Yeah, you select one of your 4 traditions: arcane, primal, occult, or divine.
So you basically pick one that becomes your thing, and then you have 2 actions. You have your spell focus. Yeah, you have dueling counter. Trigger is your opponent casts a spell from the same tradition as your tradition focus. So you pick a focus, and then they cast a spell from that tradition, one of the 4.
Right.
You are in a duel and have a tradition focus. That's a requirement. Expend a prepared spell or spell slot. You then attempt to counteract the triggering spell with the expended spell.
Yep.
This is really good counterspell, but only within the confines of a duel.
Exactly. Yeah. I've even to this day, I don't think I've really seen a counterspell actually happen in Pathfinder.
No, I haven't either.
There's rules for them. I've read them. I don't remember them because they just don't happen.
A lot of times, I feel like counter magic is one of those things where if it's too broad, it's OP. And I feel bad for players, especially if your DM starts counterspelling your stuff.
You have to write toward it, and you can't just sort of like grope your way towards it.
And you can't, if you make it too specific, players pick other options because it just doesn't feel great.
Yeah. When people are min-maxing their characters, and that's kind of a thing we do.
Yeah.
That's not a direction people go unless the GM says, "Hey, this is a story we're about to go into that's about spells and countering them and that sort of thing." Like defense against dark magic in Hogwarts kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're specifically training because that's what our game is about.
Exactly.
This subsystem lets you get a slice of that without having to dedicate an entire chunk of campaign to it, and that's what I like so far about this.
So the other action you can take, and this is an action, it costs 1 action. It's called Change Tradition Focus. Requirements. You're in a duel, and you're trained in the skill for the tradition. You're changing your focus to. So you're trained in the skill you want to change to. You do the action. you change your tradition focus to another magical tradition.
Mm-hmm.
So what I think the way I think this works is we roll initiative and got it. All right. We got to wrap this baby up.
Done. Battery death incoming.
Yeah. So we're going to run through this real quick. The way I think this works is magazine hair. You heard that right, folks. We are back in the studio. Our laptop died.
Bad battery.
But
the inventor who sold us a laptop wasn't worth the salt.
It's true. That saltless bastard.
Yeah. But we're here.
Yes, we're back in the studio. We're going to finish up the episode. We had a lot of fun on our camping trip, and we'll tell you all about it next time. But let's get back to this subsystem.
We moved on from like the actual combat duel to the spell casting duels. We talked about the dueling counter you get and the changing tradition focus action you get.
Yes. So now we're going to basically just talk about the interplay of the thoughts here. So to summarize, you use either perception or a school of magic that you're trained in to get your initiative. Yeah. That gives you your arcane tradition that you're in. And then you can either use a reaction to counter a spell that your opponent's using in the school they're using.
When you say school, I got to push back a little bit. Are you talking about tradition?
Tradition.
Okay, perfect. So arcane, occult. Yeah, it does. There's a misprint in this book, and I trip over it every time. But it's specifically arcane, it's occult, it's divine, it's primal.
Yes.
Nature.
So the requirement here, again, is you are in a duel and have a tradition focus. And it says expend a prepared spell or spell slot. You then attempt to counteract the triggering spell with the expended spell. And the requirement is the opponent casts a spell from the same tradition as your tradition focus. So here's the deal. Most spells cost 2 actions. The idea is you can spend your first action changing your tradition focus into whatever you think your opponent has or out of something that your opponent has or out of the thing that you think your opponent is going to cast on you.
Right.
Used to counteract your spell.
And we're still talking about those 4 different skills.
Exactly. So this is kind of cool because it adds a 4th element to the rock, paper, scissors in a way. But really, you're just it's a mind game where you're trying to guess what the other person is going to do and whether or not you should waste your action on it. Right?
Yeah. I mean, I see this Wizard's Duel being a little predictable after a fashion because I just don't see a cleric walking up and challenging a wizard to a duel.
Yeah.
And they have different skills with different emphases on them. So a wizard changing from arcane to occult or from occult to arcane, I can see that going back and forth. I don't know how interesting that is to me.
This is definitely cooler when both casters are of the same school, especially if it's like
tradition.
Tradition. If it's of the same tradition. Because it has more of that epic kind of 2 people trained in the same kind of thing. Sure. I would love to see like a duel between a wizard and a witch who both cast arcane spells or a bard and a witch.
See, that would be cool. And I think just as it's written, it's less interesting, but you can write around it to bring in some sensory details, some plot details, just make it interesting, the duel.
And again, it's one of those things where spells are so varied in their application that this can get way out of left field. And I think that's probably why they left it open so much, is because they know that if you're casting a bunch of crazy spells, then the combat's going to get away with you and be interesting on its own. And you really don't need like a fun little rock, paper, scissors mechanic to make it work, because 2 spellcasters duking it out with spells is going to be cool enough. You know, because one way I could see like 2 spellcasters only using spells with the that use attack rolls, maybe. That would be interesting too. That would be a fun restriction to a duel where they could only like the next day they could only prepare spells that have the to hit action, and it's just 2 spellcasters blasting each other with rays.
See, I think you just hit on a way to make it interesting because spell lists are so varied.
Exactly.
And I know like my spellcasters I have in my portfolio are very different from the ones you have. And any spells that do auto damage or save for half kind of stuff is very different than the roll of hits on people who can't roll dice worth a damn. So the idea of saying, okay, this duel is going to have certain rules we have to go by, and there's only certain spells we can sling.
Oh my gosh.
Whatever you agree upon to be specific to the two duelers. I think it's the way to go.
A druid duel.
Yeah.
Where they're both like wild shaping in and out of stuff and then casting spells and going back in wild shape or whatever.
That's a good example of how to do like the spellcasting duel and pair it with the actual combat duel.
Exactly. Jumping between these two things where, one of the druids jumps into an animal form and then now they're using more of the combat because they don't have spellcasting anymore.
A pair of Magus.
Oh yeah, a pair of Magus. Oh, that's
so this certainly isn't a pair of systems that's one size fit all.
No,
I think this is sort of like a chassis, if you will. And then you got to customize it from there to fit your game. Because I don't see this working in any game I've ever run just by itself. Yeah. And I can see the other three people around the table just getting bored stiff watching this go down.
And I feel like it's a little bare bones only because had they added anything more to this system, it would have been too much
complicated. For sure. Yeah.
And not open up to interpretation. So this is kind of a great example of designers needing to find a balance between the two.
And maybe they struck it. I don't know. I don't think this is a bad system at all.
No,
even
absolutely not. I really enjoy this.
I think it requires care.
Yeah, and I want to try and use it. I have a couple ideas of where I'm going to use it and try and use it in Kingmaker if I can. There's 2 or 3 really big moments I remember from the video game where this would have been awesome.
You need to hurry up and run the damn TTRPG so I can play my copy of the video game at home afterwards.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. We're chugging along. In our way through it. So yeah, all in all, final thoughts on this. I'd probably say that it's a fun system. It adds dramatic moments, especially when you've been building up a character's personality for a long time and they finally come into conflict with another character at the table.
Sure.
That's a perfect time for a duel, especially if there's a lot of society involved. You typically have duels when 2 people have reputations to take care of. So, if 2 druids who just, if 2 druids who just run into each other on the street, like duke it out,
throw down like a poke duel,
like that's no one cares, right? But if like 2 druids from from the greater druidic circle, butt heads about an issue and they do like a traditional,
it makes perfect sense,
combat, then that's perfect.
Yeah.
Or like you have one of the druids in the party is trying to convince the leader of a tribe of native peoples in the land.
Sure.
They could do a cool like combat duel, like a ceremonial duel.
That creates a situation where you have like low stakes in terms of hit points and your character death, TPK kind of stuff. And yet it's high stakes in terms of the society that you just mentioned.
Yeah.
So reputation kind of builds into that. It's funny you use the R word, reputation, because I think this dual system could be a lot of fun for 2 out of 5 players to do. And then having sort of like a side scenario that's going on simultaneous with that uses maybe a chase system or builds into the reputation system or just one of the other subsystems just to give the other 3 people something to do.
Eric, you know what this would be perfect?
Have it all linked.
You know what this would be perfect in?
Strength of Thousands.
Oh, that's true, actually.
What were you thinking?
A vignette.
Yeah.
Which is what we just did an episode on.
Yeah, for sure.
We just shot a short pod about vignettes, and it'll be coming out pretty soon after this one.
Yeah.
After this episode drops. So keep your eyes tuned for that.
Oh.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. But honestly, like imagine doing a vignette with it, actually that's a great way to keep all the players involved at the table, because in a vignette, you're not playing your own PCs, you're playing another character. And you can then role play this duel that affected the NPC that they're dealing with's life in a way that's substantial.
I really like that. Yeah, I'm stealing that.
Okay, awesome. Do you have any final thoughts on duels?
I've got to sit and think about them. I think in a vacuum, I think it's an okay system.
Yeah,
I do. It's cute. The rock, paper, scissors thing is a cute, different way to resolve conflict. And it's very similar to the White Wolf system. So I'm the live action vampire kind of stuff, rock, paper, scissors is very literal. So it's not like this is the first time we've had this sort of a system in a TTRPG. And I don't know. I guess I need to see it to have any real thoughts on it, because as written, I could never use it and I'll be perfectly fine. but I think there's interesting opportunities to braid this with other subsystems that will create an experience you can't have unless you do that.
Absolutely.
And that's what I'm more interested in exploring. So definitely a more arcane focused storyline with deliberate dueling requirements. Not like we just happen to have a difference of opinion and we got to figure out which way we're going to go through this duel, but something more meaningful, like character changing. What
Plot
that is, I don't
points
know. Maybe
plot points are solved by
there you go.
Duels.
Yeah.
You know,
find a critical moment
conclusion
in
of
your
duel.
storyline, and then see if a duel system is appropriate for that conflict resolution in that moment in time.
And I think it's really important to remind DMs and players, but you know, it's okay to try the stuff at your table. And if you don't like it, if it doesn't work, if it didn't have the effect you wanted, just don't use it next time.
Yeah.
Like, and report,
you never know until you give it a shot.
Exactly. And report back to us, you know, jump in our Discord. Let us know how it went. We are constantly trading stories about our games in our Discord, and it's already made me a way better DM.
Yeah.
Like, oh, hands down. All of the stuff
cool.
that all the things that everyone's talking about all the time. It's just like, it's almost overwhelming sometimes. You know what I mean? I open up Discord and I'm like, oh God, they've been talking for.
Yeah. When everybody shares their experiences, you get to take a little bit from here, a little bit from there. And then
Absolutely. You get to learn from the community. And I think that's really the most valuable part is it's like a bunch of us are DMs or like first time. We have a bunch of first time DMs in there who've been playing their whole lives and are finally starting to DM adventure paths and stuff like that. And I'm really curious about, you know, there's not enough time in the world to play all these adventure paths. So they're beginning to run adventure paths like the amnesia one. What is it called?
Oh God, Strange Aeons was the first one. Yeah. And Gatewalkers is the new one.
Someone in our Discord's running Strange Aeons. I'm sorry. I don't remember your name right now. I'm pretty tired. But
Jacques is Strange Aeons and somebody else is Gatewalkers.
Yeah. Someone in the Discord's running Gatewalkers. And I'm like, oh yeah, you got to give us the DL on this AP because I'm really interested in it, but I don't have the time.
Yeah, so you know who you are. If you are doing Strange Aeons and or the other one, Gatewalker, sorry, and you use the dual system, I want to know how that works.
Absolutely.
So talk to us. Let us know.
Cool.
That's about all I got on this.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good place to end it. Thanks so much for hanging out with us, Goblins.
Yep.
The outside shebang was a lot of fun. And if you enjoyed that kind of traveling podcast
with battery death,
we're going to fix the battery death. I have a thing I can throw money at to fix that problem. Zoom H6. If you want us to do interviews and podcasts on location places, let us know in the comments. We would love to hear about that.
We will wild shape in the woods for you.
That would be awesome. Talk about druids in the forest or even conventions and stuff like that. I would love to go to
There's an underwater adventure path. Can we get our swimming trunks on and film underwater?
I have a GoPro that can go underwater. So we'll see. Thanks so much for hanging out with Goblins. Let us know what you think in the comments. Let us know if you want to see us in more odd locations like this time. And as always, keep it weird.